During the Los Angeles March primary, voters complained of excessively long lines at voting centers. One of those voting centers was on LMU's campus. Now, in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, there's worry that there will be more, not less, mayhem at our polling locations. But what was the cause of the long lines? Well, we had just implemented a brand new voting system, but Professor Levitt of Loyola Law School and a member of the advisory board for this new voting system believed that there was a different reason for the dissatisfaction.
LA had, and I think can be really proud of, brand new voting machines that are national leaders because they are the only voting systems in the country, I believe, owned by the government, owned by the county. So LA had a system of voting machines that looked a lot like the machines in Florida in 2000. When I opened up my kit from Florida 2000, it looked a lot like the machines we were still using in LA up to 2018. And that's a problem for a population as diverse as ours, as big as ours, as multifaceted as ours. It was not very language friendly. It was not very disability friendly. It was not friendly to a lot of communities of color and other underrepresented individuals. And the county knew that. So it set out about 10 years ago to try and see what voting systems were on the market that could work better for us, for Los Angeles. And they went shopping, and it turned out the answer they came up with was, there's not really anything that works well enough that we can just buy off the shelf. And in what amounted to, I think, a really creative and really admirable effort that I think will be studied in public policy circles for decades, LA County decided to devote the time and resources to designing one themselves, a voting system that's actually built for LA County and flexible enough to grow and change as LA County grows and changes, because it's going to be different in a couple of years, and we didn't want to have to redo all this a couple of years down the road. And if you look at the experience that people had with the primary in actually using the voting machines, a new touchpad that's secure, but that looks and acts a lot like an iPad that people are used to, that's used to mark a ballot, that people can read on paper and then get sent back into the machine to be counted later. The overwhelming experience that people had was actually really favorable. They liked it a lot better, no surprise, than the old system that caused all the problems in Florida in 2000.
A report published by the Voting Solutions for All People initiative supports Levitt's claim that the machines were not the problem. It states that 70% of voters reported a positive experience, while 20% reported a negative experience, and 15% reported waiting more than 2 hours to vote. There were some issues with 1,297 of the 23,104 machines, but according to Politico, these failures were not responsible for the delays because the county's vote centers had enough of these machines to replace them.
What was the problem? There were real problems with the check-in system, the poll book system that keeps the voter registration records on a computer to check you in. And there were problems with people not voting early in the early period, but coming all on the last day. And that combination, and a third problem, of people not knowing which locations had lines, and therefore all arriving at the same ones. At the same time that there was a 4-hour line at UCLA, there were 2 other voting centers, one about half a mile to the west and one about 3/4 of a mile to the east, that had very few lines at all. And so if people had taken a 15-minute walk, they could have gotten to a voting center that really didn't have a 4-hour line. But there was no way to know that.
Still, these issues with the voter check-in system and uneven distribution of voters at different polling locations had a real impact in terms of voter satisfaction. And data from the California Secretary of State office shows that this year, almost 85% of eligible voters have registered to vote, as opposed to about 73% at this time of the year in 2016. So with more voters and a pandemic to deal with, how is LA making sure that voting will run smoothly this time around?
What's LA County doing now for November? A lot more information. So they fixed the check-in problem. There's going to be a much more active response rate for updating those rules. They fixed the technological problem. But the bigger problem is information for the public. And there is a massive public education campaign out to try and let people know about all of the different ways that they'll be able to vote. You'll be able to vote by mail. LA County is going to mail a ballot to every active registered voter. You'll also be able to go, if you prefer, you'll be able to go in person to vote instead. You'll be able to go for a number of different days in a number of different locations. And LA County is working really hard to get the word out to people. I'm actually pretty confident that the experience in November is going to be a lot better than the experience in March, and that people are going to like what they see. That they'll be able to take all that energy that you have in getting engaged about the election and putting it toward where to cast their ballot, who to cast it for, rather than worrying about the how.
In California, mail-in ballots will be sent out to all registered voters by October 5th, so voting is really just around the corner. Veronica BP, Election 2020, Los Angeles.